Welcome. It surprises us sometimes to read that David had any enemies at all. David was someone who truly cared about people, who wanted to do only those things that please God, someone whom many people truly loved and respected. Yet David had enemies on every side of him, enemies amongst the foreign nations around Israel, enemies within Israel itself, and enemies in his own family. But today, the enemies who we'll be hearing about are in some ways different from any of those enemies we've spoken of before. They are called in our psalm for today the Ziphims, and elsewhere in the Old Testament the Ziphites. These were people from David's own tribe, the tribe of Judah. When King Saul, for no proper reason, wanted to kill David, the Ziphims wanted to hand David over to him. They wanted to hand over an innocent man to die. So today we're looking at the account of them in Psalm 54. My name is Keith Simons. I'm a Bible teacher from England. I present these talks on how you can understand the King James Bible using the book of Psalms. Each week we look at a different psalm, verse by verse, word by word, seeking to understand its meaning. So today it's Psalm 54, which has a rather long ancient title. It reads, "To the chief musician on Neginoth, Maskil." And we'll come to the rest of it in a moment. But that part of it, the chief musician, the leader of music in God's house, the temple. So although this psalm feels a very personal prayer, it was for public worship. It's to be performed on Neginoth, that seems to mean on stringed instruments, on harps and instruments like that, and it's a maskil, it's a teaching psalm. We're supposed to learn from this prayer how David dealt with trouble, and from it to learn how we should deal with trouble by turning to God. The remainder then of the title. A psalm of David when the Ziphims came and said to Saul, "Doth not David hide himself with us?" Okay, you can read the history of this incident in 1 Samuel chapter 23 and verse 19, and also in 1 Samuel chapter 26 and verse 1. And from the fact that there are two references there, 3 chapters apart, you'll realise that this wasn't just something that happened once. What was happening was that Saul was searching for David, desperate to kill David. He had his soldiers going through the desert regions of Judah, trying to find where David was. And David, on 2 occasions, hid in the territory of the Ziphites, people from his own tribe, distant relatives of David. And yet the Ziphims seemed to think that they should hand David over to his enemy so that David would die. Why did they do this? Well, Saul was the king, and getting the favour of a king has always been a way to make yourself wealthy or important or successful. These people had a plan. They thought David's life was worth it. And so they went to Saul. And when it says they came and said to Saul, that's describing a long and difficult journey. They lived in the south of Judah. It was probably a 2-day journey up to Saul's own town in Benjamin region, and then a 2-day journey back just to go there. And Yet the Ziphims are deceptive. They could themselves have gone to David and arrested him and handed him over to Saul, but they didn't. They went to Saul and they offered information to Saul because they hoped for their reward. And that information is the words that are given at the end of our title. And those same words appear in much the same form in the two references in 1 Samuel. Doth not David hide himself with us? Isn't David hiding in our territory? Meaning, of course, if you come with your army and arrest him and kill him, then we want a reward. We want our prize for handing over David to you. So with that rather frightening opening, we move into what David was praying at this time. Verse 1, Save me, O God, by thy name, and judge me by thy strength. Save me, judge me. In other words, save me means be my saviour, and judge me means be my judge. And yet David feels the need to emphasise these prayers in some way. He doesn't just say save me, he says save me by thy name. God, by your reputation, by your perfect character, on account of your honour, God, please save me and rescue me from these enemies, and judge me. Be my judge by thy strength. Act powerfully to be my judge. Well, that seems a little strange to us today because we're expecting a judge to condemn David. But a judge has two responsibilities. He has to free the innocent and he has to punish the guilty. David is saying, I'm innocent. I've done nothing to deserve Saul's anger against me. He is the king. He wants to kill me for no proper reason. God, be my judge in this situation. Set me free and rescue me from this. Verse 2, Hear my prayer, O God. Give ear to the words of my mouth. Give ear, turn your ear, pay attention to what I am saying, because God, I know that if you hear my prayer, you will answer my prayer and you will act for my salvation. Verse 3, For strangers are risen up against me, and oppressors seek after my soul. Strangers, foreigners. That's extraordinary. David is calling the Ziphims strangers or foreigners. They are not foreigners. They belong to Israel's people. They belong to David's own tribe. Yet in this evil act, David completely disowns them. They deserve no place in Israel. They are like foreigners to him because they've risen up against me. They're taking action against my life. They are oppressors who seek after my soul. The word oppressors is several times in the Hebrew word, is several times in the King James Bible translated terrible ones. David is saying these are extremely cruel people. They are terrible people. They seek after my soul. My soul can mean simply my life. They're hunting after me to take my life away from me. But the word soul has a deeper meaning than life. It means a person's inner life, that person's relationship with God. Those enemies wanted David dead, but they also wanted an end to God's promises to David. They wanted to destroy David's relationship with God. And then David adds at the end of verse 3, they have not set God before them. They're not thinking about God. God is not in their mind at all. They are not thinking that God is their judge. If they were, How could they go to a king like Saul and hand over to him an innocent man? They're not caring about God in any of their thoughts. They don't think of the power of God. They don't think of how God is powerfully protecting and looking after his servant David. No, these people don't think about God at all. And that is how they've been able to turn totally evil. How these people who ought to be protecting David, who ought to be looking after this innocent man, they've instead turned to his enemies, and enemies who are planning his death. With that thought about how they're not thinking about God in any way, David adds the word Selah, which we think was a pause in the music, an opportunity to stop and just think about what we've just heard. And then in verse 4, David continues, "Behold, look, God is mine helper. The Lord is with them that uphold my soul. God is mine helper." The Hebrew word there for a helper literally means someone who surrounds you. Why would someone surround or maybe put their arms around someone else? Well, it could be to protect that person, or it could be to aid that person, to give them help. God is mine helper, declares David. The Lord is with them that uphold my soul. Uphold, support, look after, care for. God is with those that support my soul, my inner life, in this danger, my physical life, in this danger. God is on my side. Where it says the Lord is with them that uphold my soul, does David mean that God is one of many people who are supporting him in this situation? Well, that's a possible meaning, and David did have friends who were supporting him at that time. But maybe it means something different from that. Maybe it means these people who support my soul will succeed because the Lord is with them. God is on their side. So it's really God who is supporting me and looking after me through these troubles. I don't depend on people. I depend on God. And those who are my friends, they're depending on God as well. Verse 5, it says of God, "He shall reward evil unto mine enemies." Then David prays, "Cut them off in thy truth." Now, God is perfectly good. He does nothing that is evil. That is a lesson we'll be hearing again in the next verse. "I will praise thy name, O Lord, for it is good." So if God is perfectly good, how can God reward evil unto David's enemies? Well, look at that word reward. The Hebrew word is the word return, to turn back. Let's try that instead of the word reward here. "He shall turn back evil unto mine enemies." Oh, that sounds very appropriate, doesn't it? My enemies plan evil against me, but God is turning it back. It's not going to cause me any trouble because God is protecting me and surrounding me. And the enemies are trying to send trouble towards me. God is turning back that trouble. So my enemies suffer instead of me. Cut them off, he prays, in thy truth. God's truth. The Hebrew word here means faithfulness. Like someone is true to his word. We mean that person is faithful. He keeps his promises. He does what he has said he will do. God is a faithful God. Therefore, when God cuts off David's enemies in his truth, he is acting faithfully to his word. Cut them off, destroy them. Act against them in a way that they cannot continue their actions in any way, shape or form. It's a fierce declaration of God's justice and God's judgment against an evildoer. And David, when he sees this judgment that God has carried out, when he sees how powerfully God is acting to save him, David declares his promise to God in verse 6. I will freely sacrifice unto thee. David is going to offer sacrifices to God. Well, in the Old Testament, that consisted of taking an animal and burning it as a gift to God. With some types of sacrifice, you shared the meat with your friends. With others, you burnt the whole animal, except you didn't do it, of course. You handed it over to the priest who carried out the sacrifice on your behalf. But is David just saying he'll kill animals or he'll hand animals over to the priest to kill them? I will freely sacrifice unto thee? No, he's talking about a spiritual sacrifice. Yes, he's going to sacrifice those actual animals just as he has promised, but there's going to be a spiritual sacrifice as well. It meant something when people sacrificed animals. It meant that they were devoting themselves to God. It meant they were giving their whole lives to God in worship and in praise. So David would kill the animals, or rather the priests would do it on his behalf. But David would do something as well, because from his heart, from his soul deep within him, he would give honour to God. He declares, as the second part of his vow, I will praise thy name, O Lord, for it is good. Yes, God, I've asked you at the beginning to save me by thy name. And now, when you've done it, I'm going to praise your name, O God, because your name is good. Your character is good. Your honour is good. Your faithfulness is good. You are the God who answers prayer. You are the God who is the judge of people and the judge of evil acts. You are the God who is saving me in this situation and acting against those evil people with their evil deeds. Verse 7, for he, God again, for he hath delivered me out of all trouble. Yes, David looked forward to this. He spoke in a situation where there was trouble on every side, where he was fleeing for his life. But he spoke in faith, believing and trusting God to complete his work in David's life, that God would deliver him out of all trouble. When I looked at the meaning of that word for delivered, one meaning it suggested for the Hebrew word was snatched away. God has snatched me away from this trouble. It looked like my enemies would catch me, that they would hand me over to Saul and I would die. But God has rescued me out of there, snatched away from the trouble. And he's acted in judgment against David's enemies, because David adds, and mine eye hath seen his desire upon mine enemies. Mine eye. In a way, David could say, I've seen his desire upon mine enemies. But mine eye. Maybe there's a reference here to how David was crying to God in prayer, and his eye needed to be rescued from this trouble. It was seeing trouble on every side, but now his eyes had seen the judgment of God. Mine eye hath seen his desire upon mine enemies. The words his desire have been supplied by our translators. We've often seen this phrase in the book of Psalms, where David or whoever's writing the psalm refers to seeing upon their enemies. And what it means is he's seen the judgment of God. He's seen what's happened to his enemies. He's seen that God has done what is right and proper and rescued him in this situation. I don't think David is rejoicing in the destruction of his enemies, that these evil people have suffered this evil fate. I think David would have much preferred them to turn back to God, to receive God's forgiveness, to turn from being enemies to being David's friends. It wasn't David's character to be vindictive or nasty, but it was his character to give honour to God for his justice. That God has done what is right and proper in the situation, that God has carried out his verdict. Those evil people have suffered. They've suffered for their terrible acts, but God has rescued his people from all of their troubles. Please write to me. My email address is 333kjv@gmail.com. My name again is Keith Simons. The email address again, 333kjv@gmail.com. Now let me read you the whole of Psalm 54. To the chief musician on Neginoth, Maskil, a psalm of David when the Ziphims came and said to Saul, "Doth not David hide himself with us?" Save me, O God, by thy name, and judge me by thy strength. Hear my prayer, O God, give ear to the words of my mouth. For strangers are risen up against me, and oppressors seek after my soul. They have not set God before them. Selah. Behold, God is mine helper. The Lord is with them that uphold my soul. He shall reward evil unto mine enemies, cut them off in thy truth. I will freely sacrifice unto thee. I will praise thy name, O Lord, for it is good. For he hath delivered me out of all trouble, and mine eye hath seen his desire upon mine enemies.